Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome to a new and brutal tournament that started today. Welcome to the World Blitz Chess Championship in 2021. So yesterday the World Rapid Chess Championship has come to its end, but now we're following even a faster, a sicker and more brutal tournament, which is now of course the Blitz Chess Championship. And I think the Blitz Chess Championship is sort of a prestigious tournament in which everyone wants to be the winner, because I think when you win the Blitz Chess Championship, then you're basically the best tactician, you're the fast calculator. I think it's sort of a title that you want to have in your life. So that's why I think we'll have brutal in immortal games. And of course the favorites of the super event are the world champion, the current world champion Magnus Carlsen, but also Hikaru Nakamura. Also we have seen in the previous world chess championship that Alireza Firouzja was also very good. So I think we'll have brutal and immortal games. So we're starting now our tournament with beautiful game between Magnus Carlsen and Vladimir Fedoseev. And something is wrong with Magnus Carlsen, we have to say it. He has already lost one game already in this tournament, so something went wrong already for Magnus Carlsen. I think he's a little bit shaken because of his loss of the World Rapid title, because we know that Nodirbek Abdusatorov won the World Rapid Chess Championship. He became the youngest Rapid world champion in history. I think we have to congratulate again Nodirbek for winning this prestigious tournament. But now in the Blitz tournament, Nodirbek is not playing so well. Probably he's exhausted, probably he's a little bit thinking about his world championship title. Maybe he's not focused and concentrated, but doesn't matter. Still in chess history books, he written as the youngest Rapid world champion in history. So we're starting now the game. As we said, we're now already in the round 6, 21 games of Blitz. We have the Swiss system, and again we have also the same tiebreak rules like in the Rapid chess time format. So here Magnus Carlsen played with the white pieces and opened with the move d4. Vladimir Fedoseev response with knight to f6. We have c4, and now after move e6 we have knight to f3, which is this anti-Nimzo or counter-Nimzo Indian setup. We don't want to play knight to c3. I've mentioned it millions of times on my channel here. Knight to c3 will cause you probably the spin, and then after bishop to c3 you could have maybe a messed up pawn structure with the move b takes c3. So that's why the anti-Nimzo setup is not allowing you this scenario. If you play, for instance, bishop to b4, still we can cover with the knight or with the bishop, and then after bishop to d2, you still have a healthy pawn structure. So okay, here after move knight to f3, Fedoseev played really weird move h6, and Peter Leko mentioned in the live stream on Chess24 that he sometimes doesn't like Vladimir Fedoseev's openings, because Vladimir Fedoseev is really a brilliant and beautiful tactician, but his opening prep is not so well. So he criticized that a little bit, because not that he wanted really to criticize Fedoseev, but he wanted to play him much better, because he knows that Fedoseev is a strong grandmaster. So that's why he causes himself a little bit the problems in an early stage of the game. He creates himself some problems in an early stage of the game. So that's why I think you should really study your openings, and this move h6 is not such a good move. It's okay prophylactic move. Maybe you're preventing this bishop to g5 idea, but it's really not the best of ways how to proceed in the anti-Nimzo or counter-Nimzo in this setup. So here after move h6 we have now the Catalan setup here by Magnus Carlsen. We have now the move g3, we have bishop to b4, and now knight to d2, and here we have d5 by Vladimir Fedoseev. And okay, here already the pawn structure is dynamic in the center of the board, so many things can happen. But now with the move h6, I think you see now why it is important not to lose any tempi in the opening stage. With the move h6, if you could just imagine this position without the move h6, Black's king would be already castled, Black's king would be already there and secured. Now, because you lost already the tempo, now Magnus Carlsen has the opportunity to go into this line. You create a check, and now the only way to cover yourself is to move knight to c6. And basically many times you don't want to have this knight on c6. You want to have maybe here even the knight on d7, or you want to have the knight on c6, but before that you want to play the move c5 and then knight to c6. So that's why here with the move knight to c6, a little bit the development of Black is a little bit paralyzed. We have to agree, I think. So that's why this move h6, as I said, there are are these tiny little things in openings that you can make as a mistake. So you see, moving unnecessary pawns is, I think, here huge opening problem, so which causes now a comfortable game here for Magnus Carlsen. After move knight to c6, we have now a3, kicking away the bishop to d2, and now after move bishop to d2, I think mission accomplished here. Magnus Carlsen has a beautiful opening. Still he has a flexible dark square bishop. Many times in this Queen's Indian Nimzo Indian structures, the dark square bishop doesn't have such a good activity. It's sometimes even blocked out by its own knight, or sometimes you have to search for good squares. Now in this particular scenario, see, after d takes c4, still we can take d takes c4, and this bishop has the flexibility to go e3, even bishop to f4, targeting maybe here the c7 weakness. So many opportunities here now for white, and still Magnus Carlsen has the bishop here. If we evaluate now the black's development, it's not so good. You see the bishop is a little bit paralyzed by its own pawn here on e6. The knights, okay, they are perfectly fine, they're centralized, but there is not simply a good way here to make progress, I think, from black's perspective. So here the continuation, we have now Carlsen, bishop to g2, knight to e4, attacking the bishop, and you see now bishop to f4. The bishop is not locked. Many times, as we said in the Nimzo or Queen's Indian structures, you have already played even the move e3, then the bishop would be blocked out by its own pawn. But now this bishop has really great flexibility. We can move it even in sometimes here on e5, then followed with knight to e5, would have a control of this maybe very important square on the board. So that's why here so far a great opening prep by Magnus Carlsen. So here queen to d7, we have now queen to c2, because if you castle here, Fedoseev prepared really a nice tactical shot. If you castle too early here, then you get this one. This is the standard knight to d4, discover attack, and you have to take basically now the pawn on d7, but you now get this intermezzo, knight takes e2, it comes with a check here, and then you can take out the queen, and black has gained the pawn and is now much better. So very beautiful preparation here. So that's why Magnus retreated with the move queen to c2. We have now b6, and now kingside castling here by Magnus Carlsen. We have now bishop to b7, rook from a to c1. Normal idea. We see that the bishop and the queen and the rook are targeting simply the c7 weakness. And okay, what to do here? Here Fedoseev played now the move a5, and there is, I think, now a beautiful tactical sequence that unfortunately Magnus Carlsen missed. This is Blitz chess, of course, you cannot see everything, but here I think a good way was c takes d5, which Magnus Carlsen played in the beginning. But after e takes d5, there is now a beautiful sequence that you can play. You can play the move knight to e5, and the point is, after knight to e5, you don't have to take out the knight. You can play queen takes c7, and you can grab the piece. You see now, if queen takes c7, then of course here rook takes c7, and now again two pieces are hanging. You have to retreat with the knight, and white is gaining an extra, gets back his extra piece, but then is continuing the game with an extra pawn. But even if you try here something rook from a to c8, you see, in order to maybe stay somehow fixed here and trying here to maybe protect everything, then queen to e5 wins back the knight, and again Magnus Carlsen would have a comfortable game. So here unfortunately Magnus Carlsen missed this tactic. Let's see, if you play here rook to e8, then simply rook takes c8 can happen, and here after rook takes c8 again we can stay with our queen. Here rook to c1, we can even compete on that file, and then again here attack the c7 weakness. But okay, here after e takes d5, Magnus Carlsen didn't play the move knight to e5, he played queen to a4. He is pinning now a little bit the queen here, but there is always this simplification idea that black can make this idea. Here's black can play knight to e5 and then attack the queen and simply trade off the queens. I think trade off the queens would favor, would be good here for black, because black is simply lacking in development here. Black doesn't have any more the bishop pair, so black needs to search for simplification in the position. That's why trade off queen is perfectly fine, but still you have worries about the c7 weakness. The c7 is of course a long-term weakness here in black's position, so that's why first rook to c8 was played by Fedoseev. We have rook to c2, and now g5. And then this is the move I think that Magnus Carlsen missed a little bit. Instead of this rook to c2, h4 here is perfectly fine. You're staying with your piece here on this very active square. It's very important, I think, to stay with the bishop on this diagonal, to be very active. Magnus Carlsen unfortunately played a seemingly active move, but it's not an active move because he allowed here g5, and Fedoseev realized this very, very well, that he can kick away the bishop. Now the bishop has to retreat. We have now bishop to d2 here by Magnus Carlsen. We have knight to e5. Now comes this simplification in the air. We have queen to d7, and now a knight to d7. And okay, again, white is slightly better even after this raise of pieces, but here Fedoseev, I think, liberated himself from the bishop pair activity, from this very active queen on a4. Now it was simply time to regroup, and what you want to do here from black's perspective is maybe to cement one of these knights on c4. You would love maybe if you could just imagine with this knight on d7 on the square c4, then it would be a perfect position because you would have the outposted knight on e4, but also the outposted knight on c4. The problem if black cements the knight on c4, it cannot be really kicked away with the potential b3 move, because sometimes then the a3 is weak. So that's why this is now the clear idea of black's how to make progress here. A potential outpost on c4 is now the main strategical goal. So here the rook from f to c1, Magnus continues the pressure on the c file. We have now c6, you have to play this move, knight to e1 here by Magnus, and now c5. And now again, Magnus Carlsen doesn't react well here. He played now the move f3, which is really an unnecessary move. The best way here is simply to proceed d takes c5. And from this point on, I think, again, white could have a comfortable game, because even if you take, let's see, possible continuation, knight takes d2, then rook takes d2, and whatever you do, b takes c5 or knight to c5 loses simply here the pawn on d5. And even if you take, let's see, here after d takes c5, even if you take with the pawn, then simply bishop takes e4, we have d takes e4, and then bishop to a5. Here in the continuation of the game, you can play then afterwards knight to g2, knight to e3, bishop to c3, and white has gained the pawn and will probably win this potential endgame. So that's why here f3 really unnecessary. You have to play, I think, here d takes e4, whatever happens, even here after pardon me, d takes c5, after d takes c5, even if we play knight takes c5 here, again, we can agree that the problem here is that this isolated pawn here on d5. You can play then afterwards bishop to e3, maybe rook to e8 can happen, but now with knight to f3, knight to d4, white will create this very important blockade. Whenever you face an isolated d pawn, the best way, one of the best ways at least, is to play a powerful blockade. So you see with this setup, knight to f3, bishop to e3, white will accomplish this powerful blockade around the square d4 and would never allow this pawn to get advanced. So these were really the possible outcomes after the move c5. Every outcome, I think, would be perfectly fine for Magnus Carlsen, but unfortunately he played f3. Kicking away the knight, we have knight takes d2, rook to d2, and now c4. You see, you had your chance, Magnus. Now the game is equal again, and I still kind of like now more even black's position, because black has here a 3 versus 2 potential pawn storm here on the queen side. This is now the main strategic goal, the pawn majority attack by black. So here in the continuation, Magnus counterattacks here in the center with the move e4. We have now knight to f6, e5, knight to e8. Very important move, because we're waiting now. We want to place our knight here on e6. On e6, the knight would be perfectly fine because it creates also blockade, but it also attacks the backward pawn on d4. This backward pawn is also very important because it will be the main object here of black's attack. So here in the continuation, knight to c2, knight to g7, knight to e3. We have now b5. Black makes simply progress on the queen side. This is perfectly fine. We have now f4, and now rook to d8. We have now f5. Here we have h5, h4. Magnus Carlsen is paralyzing a little bit the king side, g4, and now rook to f2. And okay, here Magnus Carlsen announced that he's trying now to play f6, knight to f5, and potential knight to e7 fork, followed with probably a rook to f5, and then attacking the pawn on h5. Here in the continuation, we have b4. Fedoseev continues his pressure on the queen side. We have now f6, knight to e6, and now knight to f5. Now the fork is here, the threat on e7, so that's why Fedoseev played king to f8, knight to e7 anyway here by Magnus Carlsen, and after rook to c7, here a takes b4. Okay, a takes b4, but now comes really one of the critical moments of this game. Here Magnus Carlsen missed, I think, some tactics, but we shouldn't be criticizing so much, because these moves are so hard to find. And we have to again say this is Blitz chess. You cannot really calculate like Stockfish. I use the Stockfish engine at home. Even if you use the Stockfish engine at home, this tactical sequence is so brutal, is so complicated, so we shouldn't really criticize it. I'm just saying that now the best way here for Magnus Carlsen would have been the move rook to f5. Rook to f5 followed with rook to h5 and then rook to h8 is even checkmate. So that's why here in the continuation, black has to play rook to e8. Now after move rook to h5, okay, black can also take out this very important pawn on d4, but now king to f2 would be the most important move in order to include your king here into defense. Then here c3, of course, played by would be the continuation by black, because black has to make progress further on the queen side. Then after b takes c3, rook to c3, and now probably rook to d1 would, I think, be a sort of a move that is helping out white to get back into the game, because then also the d5 is hanging, and we have also this very important check here on h8, and then we can also trade off the rooks and finally grab the pawn on d5. This was the sequence that Magnus Carlsen missed. Instead of this move rook to f5, he played rook to d1, and this causes now many problems for the world champion, because Fedoseev played here beautiful tactical shot, which is the correct move. This wasn't the tactical shot that's bad. And you know, sometimes when we play tactics, okay, we played maybe bad tactic, but the psychology behind this tactic causes many problems, because suddenly you're scared. What happened? What did I miss? And maybe it wasn't the best of tactics, but your opponent gets scared because of a tactical shot. But not this one. This is a correct tactical shot, because Fedoseev has here after move rook to e7, f takes e7, king to e7. Now this 2 versus 1 situation, and the problem is now, which Peter Leko really beautifully realized in the live stream. Peter Leko is really one of my favorite commentators on YouTube, and he said that the problem about this particular tactical shot was that the bishop here it's simply paralyzed by this pawn structure of blacks, and Peter Leko realized that immediately, but just watching the position in 1 second. That's why I love Peter Leko's here analysis. As I said, he's such a beautiful and strong grandmaster. His ideas in chess are really beautiful, so that's why he realized immediately that the pawn structure, this pawn chain that black has built, causes now many problems here for Magnus Carlsen. So after move knight king to e7, we have now bishop to f1. So Magnus is trying desperately to get back with the bishop into the game. We have rook to a8, very important move, getting use of the open file. Rook from f to d1, bishop to c6, king to f2, and now rook to a2, attacking simply the weakness here on b2. We have now king to e3, and now bishop to a4. We have rook to c1, bishop to b3, and now bishop to g2. Attacking the pawn, we have knight to c7, protecting everything, and king to f4. This was now a crucial mistake here by Magnus Carlsen. King to f4 is not good. You have to play rook to f2. You have to stay glued together and compact, because you don't want to have this rook loosed. When you play king to f4 like Magnus Carlsen did, then the problem is always this tactical shot with the move c3. c3 then you cannot take, and then you see here your rook is hanging. So here the continuation, unfortunately for Fedoseev, he played the move knight to e6, which was not the correct move. As we said, the main issue is this move. c3 is simply winning the game here for black. Really wild stuff. So Magnus made a mistake with king to f4, but now also Fedoseev allowed here Magnus Carlsen to get back into the game. But again, Magnus Carlsen played the mistake. Instead of this move king to f5 that Magnus Carlsen played, he played now the move king to e3. And king to e3, king to e3 would be the perfect move. He played king to f5, which was now huge mistake. And the problem about this move king to f5, that you are getting your king on a light square. You see now why it is so bad to get your king on a light square, because here after move king to f5, we have now the move c3. As we said, Fedoseev missed it one move ago, but now he didn't miss this tactic, because the problem is now, which of course Peter Leko saw immediately on the live stream, really beautiful coverage by Peter Leko. And here after move c3, the problem is this one. We're saying, of course, b takes takes c3 is not a possible move, because you lose simply the rook on d2. So that's why you have to play rook to f2. But now comes the stunner, rook takes b2. The problem is now if you play this one, rook takes b2, then you have here c takes b2, and the problem is now you cannot play a blockade on b1 because you get this idea bishop to c2, and that's why this king is so naked here. On f5 you can maybe cover, but even after that bishop to e4 is even checkmate. So that was now the huge mistake by the world champion Magnus Carlsen. We have now, after move rook to b2, rook to f1, we have bishop to c2, we have now rook takes c2. Magnus sacrificed now the rook back for the exchange, but now Vladimir Fedoseev has now these two connected pawns, and this is now completely winning endgame here for black. So rook to a1, we have c2, rook to a7, king to d8. Okay, you grab this pawn, but now after move knight to d4, king to f6, and after rook to f2, in this position Magnus Carlsen resigned. Why did he resign? Because after trades of rooks you can take out this one, but now we have the promotion on c1 and it's game over. So what you say, Magnus Carlsen is shaking. Something is not going well here for Magnus Carlsen. He's probably messed up still because of his loss of the rapid chess title. I'm not sure what's going on with the world champion. Still, he has of course many rounds to play. Still, this is Magnus Carlsen. Still, he is favored to win this event, but after round 6 he has already 2 losses, which wasn't the case I think for a long time. So that's why it's time for the world champion to get somehow back into the game, and we're hoping that he's getting out of this psychological mess that's probably in here now. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. Nevertheless, maybe it was something about Magnus Carlsen, but we have to also say Vladimir Fedoseev played a beautiful game. He came out of the opening in a bad shape, but his rook sacrifice on e7 I think was a beautiful tactical shot, paralyzed Magnus Carlsen's pieces, created 2 connected pass pawns. Beautiful game here by black. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see also some of the games that we have covered in rapid time chess, here's the link of our analysis before. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.